Okay, I'm going to call to order the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee at 6:03 p.m. And the first item on our agenda is the agenda. Can I have a motion on the agenda?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so that's unanimous. The next item on our agenda, and the only item really on our agenda, is consideration of the building emissions reduction ordinance proposal. And tonight we have a public forum on that that is being brought forward from a resolution passed by the City Council and referred to TUC, the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee, back on May 20th. Tasking us to consider a building emissions reduction ordinance. And part of that consideration, asked the committee to, quote, take input from members of the public, climate advocacy organizations, relevant labor unions, large business owners, businesses, and nonprofit building tenants, leaders of other cold climate cities that have adopted building decarbonization policies, and from any other group and individual that the TUC feels should be included in the policy-making process. So this is a forum whose intention is to allow that public input. I will add, though, that material associated with the proposal was only posted yesterday, and so I understand that it is likely that many of the people who would want to speak, and organizations that would want to speak on this matter may not have had a chance to read the proposal yet. But fear not, we will be not deliberating on anything tonight, and there'll be plenty of time to submit comments at a future TUC meeting where we will be deliberating the proposal. But I'd also encourage people to submit written comments to the committee. You can email them to the entire committee, or you can email them to me, the chair of the committee. I'm Mark Barlow, and my email is mbarlow@burlingtonvt.gov, and I'll make sure they're distributed to the entire committee. And without any further setup of that, I'll turn it over to Councilor Merrick Broderick, who was the lead sponsor on the resolution that brought this Bureau consideration forward.
Thank you, Chair Barlow. Thank you all for coming, both in person and online. I would like to start by personally apologizing for not having a proposal public prior to the long weekend. And as Chair Barlow said, it's completely understandable that relevant stakeholders who may not have had a chance to look at the proposal or deliberate on it may have unformulated comments or questions, and I highly encourage those people to send them to the TUC via email. But to those who are here to engage in public forum on this, I thank you sincerely. I'd like to also add that, like Chair Barlow said, this is merely a proposal and a first draft, and I'm very hopeful and excited to work with all relevant stakeholders, including our city departments, like Department of Permitting and Inspections, Burlington Electric Department, building owners, and the people of Burlington as we work on advancing Burlington's climate policy forward to create a system that works for everyone in this city. With that being said, this draft of the Building Emissions Reduction Ordinance is designed to do the following: expand carbon emission and heating efficiency regulations to previously underregulated or unregulated existing buildings, essentially to plug gaps between our existing ordinances. To put buildings already highly efficient on the path to electrification and clean heating alternatives now, and put less efficient buildings on that path by 2030. So first, the scope, what buildings are affected by BERO under this proposal. This will apply to existing buildings that are 10,000 to 49,999 square feet. Based off of my research, that creates a universe of about 279 buildings. However, the building performance requirements exclude rental housing that is impacted by the Rental Energy Efficiency Ordinance, which is about 60 of that 279. This also excludes new construction and buildings greater than 50,000 square feet. So moving on to the building performance requirements and compliance. Applicable buildings would be required to achieve the following performance standards calculated in terms of on an annual basis: British thermal units, BTUs, used per conditioned square foot for space heating purposes by the following dates. 90,000 BTUs per square foot must go below 90,000 BTUs per square foot or over must go below 90,000 BTUs by January 1st, 2026. 70,000 BTUs per square foot must go below 70,000 or up, must go below 70,000 by January 1st, 2028. 50,000 BTUs per square foot or higher must go below 50,000 by January 1st, 2030. These goals are designed as such that the least efficient buildings must quickly begin work on raising their efficiency and thus lowering emissions. Meanwhile, those who have already started to put in work to make their buildings more efficient have more time to reach the goals laid out and figure out how to keep progressing to hit goals. Notification. Just as the city had done for the rental weatherization ordinance, the city will acquire energy consumption data for all applicable buildings, and the city would notify building owners on the schedule that follows. All affected building owners using over 90,000 BTUs notified by February 1st, 2025. All affected building owners using over 70,000 BTUs notified by February 1st, 2026. All affected building owners using over 50,000 BTUs notified by February 1st, 2028. Note that if a building owner wants to dispute the city's data, they must provide current energy consumption data for their building within 30 days of receiving notice. Noncompliance. If passed under current authority, normal ordinance violation fees would apply, which is up to $500 per violation, until or if greater authority is given by voters. In conjunction with this ordinance, there will potentially be a March 2025 ballot item asking for authority from voters to impose a carbon pollution impact fee on buildings out of compliance with this ordinance if it passes. Under this current proposal, that carbon impact fee will be 234 metric tons of CO2 generated by heating systems over the limit at the time of the offense. This fee would be imposed annually. This is on par with building emissions reduction ordinances seen in Cambridge, Boston, and New York City, and is based on average cost of building emission reduction measures. Requirements for buildings using 50,000 BTUs per square foot or less. This includes rental housing. With this, I'm talking about the already highly efficient buildings or buildings once they reach that 50,000 or under BTUs per square foot goal. Because they are already below 50,000 BTUs, they don't need to do anything related to efficiency in terms of this ordinance. They are not affected by any potential fees. However, under this ordinance, it would be required that buildings that are under 50,000 BTUs per square foot consult with an energy efficiency utility or a certified building contractor regarding ways to reduce climate pollution by January 1st, 2026, or within 1 year of achieving 50,000 BTUs per square foot. Extensions would be given if building owners can demonstrate lack of consultant availability. Second, building owners would take any cost-effective measures recommended in the consultation within 1 year of the consultation's completion. Once again, extensions given if building owners can demonstrate lack of contractor availability. This is mostly speaking about electrification, as it is most attractive for buildings that are already highly efficient, under 50,000 BTUs per square foot, being my example. And under this proposal, it would prioritize but not mandate at the moment the electrification of those buildings now before 2030, while simultaneously improving the efficiency of buildings that aren't at that goal yet and putting them on this path in the future. Administration, an administrative fee on covered buildings to pay for city staff hours and other resources needed to administer and enforce. This would be administered, including technical and support/incentive services by BED, Burlington Electric Department, with enforcement from Department of Permitting and Inspections, and legal for both of the previously named by City Attorney's Office. BED is an efficiency utility. Permitting and Inspections is the Enforcement Department for civil offenses, and the City Attorneys. Voter-approved carbon pollution impact fee referenced above would allow for more robust administration and enforcement of this ordinance. And once again, while saying that, this is again just a proposal, and I'm very hopeful and excited to be working closely with these departments to make sure that any ordinance can be administered properly. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. I guess we still don't have Councilor Bergman. I think he's trying to join but hasn't yet. So at this time, I think I want to open the public comment. Is anybody else who's joined us who wants to speak at public forum and not so we'll open up the public forum, and I'll ask speakers to come to the table. There's a microphone there. Make sure the green light's on. There's a little push button. It says push on the front. Make sure the LED is on. And state your name for the record before you give your comment, please.
Do we have online speakers?
We're going to do in person first, and then we're going to do folks online after. So, our first speaker is Natalie Braun. And the other thing, I guess I would ask people to keep your comments to 2 or 3 minutes, if you could. Thank you.
This would be a tall individual. My name's Natalie Braun, and I've seated myself fully with myself in the premise that we're in the midst of a future threatening climate emergency, about which I am deeply concerned. And normally, you can see on the sign-in sheet that I'm not a Burlington resident, but I'm a psychologist in Burlington. So what happens here matters to me, and it matters to my students, the people with whom I work. I wouldn't normally advertise that I'm not a Burlington resident in a meeting such as this, that I'm from Essex, but that's really what I'd like to spotlight in my comments tonight. I'm part of the Essex Energy and Climate Committee, and I spent the last 5 or 6 days tabling at the Champlain Valley Fair in our weatherization booth. And I need more than one hand's worth of fingers to share with you the number of people who, when they came to the table and were talking to us, said, "Oh yes, but shouldn't India be doing this? Why we are so small, we contribute so little to the problem globally. Shouldn't India, let's have India start, China start, the California start more than us." And I recognize what a false equivalence that is, because what it does is it allows us to stay, when folks say that, to stay safely in a place of inertia and the waiting for other people to do things. And a building that can do better is a building that can do better anywhere. I don't care where it is, if it's in India, if it's in China, if it's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's a building that can do better. And it takes all of those buildings to make a difference. So you all are nimble in Burlington. You have momentum around these issues. And so the second reason Essex is important, one was there I was at the Champlain Valley Fair as a member of that committee. The second reason is what you do is extremely influential in the surrounding communities. I'm on the Energy Committee. This is next. We watch you. You do these very good things that you've done. Williston is already working on this. I'm on the committee. I'm not going anywhere. And this is what we're going to put, one of the things we're going to put forward next. So it matters hugely that you all are, well, I fully support this proposal for the reasons that I've outlined. And I think it would be wonderful. We'll end up with a core of Chittenden County communities that the whole U.S. will look at and say, wow, okay, Seattle, New York City, Boston, Cambridge, Chittenden County, Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Next, we have Elizabeth Chant.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Chant, C-H-A-N-T. I'm also not from Burlington, although I have lived here in the past. I'm from Shelburne, but more relevant is I have 30 years of experience in the energy efficiency industry. I helped start Efficiency Vermont way back in the day and went on to help start the DC Sustainable Energy Utility. I've worked in DC, New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, many of the states like Vermont that are at the leading edge of what's going on in the energy efficiency and sustainable energy world. I want to compliment the first draft. I'm glad to hear it's a draft because I think you will get a lot of good feedback to improve it, but I want to compliment it. The draft showed that you're paying attention to best practices in this very new device. It's only 5 or 10 years that these building performance standards have been used out in the world, and there are best practices that are being recognized in the industry, and you've shown good attention to some of those best practices, like staging how buildings come into the system by size and by energy usage. And putting benchmarking as such a necessary precursor to the whole process. There are other best practices that I want to put on the table that some may need to be gently inserted into the ordinance. Others just need to be thought about by you as city councilors in terms of how the ordinance is ultimately promulgated and implemented, because that's really where the rubber hits the road. You can have the best building performance standard in the world. Best practice shows that if you don't have education, technical assistance, financial incentives, and financing mechanisms, it's going to be hard for that standard to really make the changes that you all are looking for. So there are standards in program design that have best practices in program design that are being codified, if you will. And so looking at those as you're designing the wording of the ordinance and paying attention to some of those prerequisites. A couple of specific questions that I noticed as I looked at this draft. The timeline at the front end I know is really aggressive and tight, and I understand what you're trying to do, but I want to put a cautionary flag on an unintended consequence. So notification of the worst performing buildings by February 1, 2025. And those buildings need to be under that first benchmark by January 1 of the following year. That's 11 months. The way these projects unfold, that is like the blink of an eye for a big building. These projects take years sometimes. I mean, you can stage them sometimes in a year or two, but these projects, if they are comprehensive, the way we want them to be, take years to design, develop, contract, and then go into construction. Even the construction cycle alone can take a year for one of these. The unintended consequence I want you to be careful about is that you push buildings to do what we call the low-hanging fruit. That they say, oh, well, we can get under that first standard by just doing da-da-da-da-da, the easy stuff, call it. That makes the deeper retrofits, the big systems, harder later for some people. So be careful about that. On technical assistance and all the players that need to get involved in this, the staffing right now is going to be one of the critical factors. It's what everyone in the energy efficiency industry is facing right now. Workforce development has to be part of the plan, not just for the auditors, but for contractors, for crews, for everyone involved in the effort. Last, I do want to point out there are building owners that I'm going to point out a need for some flexibility, and sometimes that's hard to get into ordinance language. I understand that, but it helps program operators, BED in this case, more successfully tackle market considerations. There may be building owners with multiple buildings. You want to make sure that you're encouraging them to do the right building first, and they may have financial constraints. They may have constraints on what they can borrow that are real, that are germane, if they are working with a campus, for example. Buildings with particular schedules, restaurants. Well, I can remember one of the first projects where my eyes were opened was like, guess what? Energy efficiency at restaurants, it happens in the middle of the night because that's the only time the restaurant is closed. So things like that. Buildings have certain daily cycles and seasonal cycles that need to be taken into account in the timing of all of this rollout. And the implementer needs to pay attention to those. And then last, as counselors, if you can be paying attention to the coordination that is necessary between policy and programs in the implementation of this ordinance. So bottom line is I support this ordinance. The draft language is a really good start. Thank you very much, and I will be submitting some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next, we have Jacob Griffin.
Hi, can you guys hear me? So, my name is Jacob Griffin. I'm a student, a citizen, and I was also a policy research intern at Run on Climate this past summer. So I spent a lot of time kind of looking at not only this policy, but the policies of other cities like Cambridge, Denver, Seattle, DC, and seeing what worked for them, what would be best for Burlington. And something I'm really here to express my support of is the overall amendment, but also to speak out against future efforts to weaken or water down the building emission reduction requirements, which would be Section 880, I believe. I believe these are very appropriate requirements for Burlington, in part because when you look at the number of buildings impacted in other cities and the number of residents these cities have, I created a ratio for this. It's the number of buildings impacted per 1,000 residents. Burlington falls very in line with the policies of these other cities. Cambridge has about a 9.28 buildings impacted per 1,000 residents, which is one of the strongest and most aggressive policies in the country. Whereas Burlington at 6.25 falls much closer to Seattle and DC. And when you consider the fact that we're only talking about, I believe, 279 buildings. Some of these, such as places like Champlain College, the soda plant on Pine Street, they've already made alterations to kind of fall in line with some of these requirements. So the number at 279 just keeps going down. And I feel like that's why it's so important to keep this ordinance as strong as it is right now in those areas, because, Burlington, according to a 2001, I believe it was a design review guide, which was published by the city, there's over 11,000 buildings in Burlington. I'm sure that number has certainly gone up, and on top of that, there's over 18,000 housing units in Burlington. This is 279 buildings. It is a very, very, very small proportion of the buildings in Burlington. And there has been a commitment made by this city to reach net zero by 2030. I understand that that is an extremely aggressive policy and there has been a pandemic, but to me, Burlington has set not just that commitment, but a precedent that they want to be a city that has strong climate policy. And to me, weakening this ordinance or reducing the requirements, making it less buildings affected is just the opposite direction of where we should be going. This seems to be just a small step in the path that we have to take. I mean, at a federal level, Joe Biden has said that we need to reduce emissions. His policy is, I believe, 50 to 52% by 2030. I'm not even sure if this amendment is going to be following that level of policy. I mean, this feels like a very small step that we have to take, and that efforts to weaken or reduce this would be not following a precedent that Burlington has set of being a strong climate city. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Next, we have Abby Phillips.
You hear me okay? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. I am a longtime Burlington resident and UVM student. I live in Ward 1. First of all, I would just like to thank the counselors for taking the time out of what I am sure is an extremely busy week for you to be here and be present and be actively listening to members of your community that you represent. So in my opinion, I think that this Bureau is the first piece of the puzzle that Burlington needs to meet our net zero goals. I think we are quite far from reaching these goals while we are making great progress and you're doing a lot of good work to get us there. I think that there is this false illusion that we are much more far along in strong climate action than we really are. The second and more important piece of this puzzle, I think that Burlington is capable of doing a lot more to get us to net zero, and I think that this starts with you as city councilors of Burlington. And I think if we want to reach our net zero goals, we do need super strong and super aggressive climate policy like Bureau. As a resident who is now over 18, I believe that I have a moral responsibility to vote in every single election, and I think that everybody that does vote votes for who they believe to be the best candidates based on whatever metrics that they choose for themselves. And I think that once you are elected to public office, you are responsible for meeting the needs of the citizens in your ward and within your city. It is this mutual relationship where both parties are gaining something. You are in public office, and therefore you are supporting the things that constituents, voted you in there in the first place. However, I think that there is growing concern from Burlington residents where we feel we have been led astray, not just by the current city council, but past city councils as well, that there have been lots of lackluster climate promises made. I think personally that Burlington's net zero energy roadmap is not there yet, but it certainly has the potential to be quite a lackluster promise. I think that Burlington residents are doing great jobs on an individual level to reduce their emissions, but I think now it's time for City Council to really step up and do their part. And I think we need strong climate policy in Burlington now, both to meet our net zero energy goals and also for City Council to fulfill promises that you have made to your constituents. I believe that Burlington has the potential to be a flagship city for strong climate action and to be some of the first in the country to meet our net zero energy goals. I think we have the chance to be a part of history. I think you have the chance for your names to be known in history. If we act now, we just need City Council to listen to their constituents and the people that voted you into office. So please, please listen to the people of Burlington and listen to your constituents. There's lots of us here, and I think there is overwhelming support for a strong Bureau and for strong climate action from here on out. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abby. Next up is Alexander Herron.
All right. Hello, can you guys hear me? Perfect. So my name is Alexander Nahara, and I just wanted to come today to voice my support for the ordinance to regulate emissions in the city of Burlington. I'm sure you guys know, but these emissions are a huge, huge issue worldwide. You know, one of the second biggest type of emissions into our atmosphere. And we can do a lot, of simple things to reduce them, which is something I believe this ordinance is really effective at doing. A little bit about myself. I'm an environmental science student at UVM with a focus on ecological design, and I've taken a bunch of classes within the Rubenstein School focusing on reducing energy and infrastructure, or energy loss, that sort of thing. Specifically, we looked at the Johnson House over on Main Street, which is being renovated at the time to figure out how to reduce energy loss during heating. And the most important thing I noticed during that process was how simple acts, like a choice of window, how we insulate our buildings, can create so much difference. During that time, we saw a huge reduction in the amount of heat and energy lost, and heating is a huge part of CO2 emissions in housing. So, things like that, we can do a lot of big change through simple acts like that. This summer, I also worked as a canvasser for VPIRG, which is a statewide environmental nonprofit. And during that time, I had the pleasure of talking to a lot of people across the whole entire state, and also, directly in Burlington as well. So I feel very blessed for that time because it gave me, the opportunity to speak to many of your constituents who, do feel very big issues about this. I was mainly focused on a different issue during that time, but, people would even bring up energy, protecting us from CO2 emissions as, a big issue they were concerned about. So I wanted to come speak today, both as someone who's in the community, but, wanting to express for a large amount of people across Burlington area. So I believe this ordinance is, a big part of putting Burlington on the path for being a true leader in sustainability, like Boston, like Cambridge, all these other cities are doing big work. We have to strive for our net zero goals and take our steps to protect our city, protect our lake, protect our world from these environmental damages. So thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Next, we have Kat Terrell.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Kat Terrell. I am a Burlington Ward 1 resident, and I'm here to express my support for Bureau. I feel like this ordinance could be a really great, big, tangible step towards Burlington's energy emission goals. I can speak for me and my colleagues to say that we are very excited about this bill and excited about the symbolism of taking another big step forward as the city of Burlington. And as Natalie was saying, we have a lot of influence over the state, over the region. We set an example, and I think this would be a really great step forward that can inspire a lot of future greater steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Next, Lindsay, is it Maskler? Maskler.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Maskler, and I'm a Ward 1 resident and voter. I think it's super important to regulate building emissions as part of our 2030 climate goals. With the climate crisis progressively getting worse, we really need some strong policies, like what Barrow is. Our future relies on this proposal. It brings the meaningful change our community needs. I think it's so important that we have this proposal in action. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Stoves?
Hi, can you hear me? Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Stokes, and I'm a student and a resident of Burlington. I believe this policy is crucial in the fight against climate change, and it emphasizes the importance of holding people and businesses accountable for their role in the environment. So I am here today to support this policy, as taking steps like these are essential for the future of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up is Olivia, is it Geddes?
Hello, my name is Olivia Geddes, and I am a Ward 1 resident here in Burlington. I'm here because I'm passionate about addressing climate change and meeting climate policy goals like our 2030 net zero goal. I strongly support regulating building emissions, and therefore this ordinance that we are discussing today. I hope you all will support this policy and more, even stronger climate policies in the future, and listen to how the Burlington constituents feel about climate issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. Next up, we have Max Handelman, maybe?
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, maybe pull the mic a little bit closer.
How about now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Hello, my name is Max Handelman. I'm a Ward 1 resident of Burlington. I speak now not as a climate expert or a policymaker, but as someone who wishes to see my city give back to its residents. The climate crisis continues to worsen at an exponential rate, so it's imperative that all parts of our community come together to combat the issue. We, the residents of Burlington, certainly do our part to reinforce the city and its people's drive for environmental sustainability. I know that there's a strong sense of connection in our ambitious goal for net zero emissions by 2030. I think that the Bureau Ordinance invokes the power of civic duty to hold the perpetrators of environmental destruction accountable, and this ordinance will ensure that our efforts for a safer, greener future is held in tandem by all in a united community voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. And last on the sheets anyways, we have Ryan Hagan.
Hey there, can you hear me? Thank you all. My name is Ryan Hagan. I live in the South End, and I'm also here to voice my support for this ordinance. I think we are absolutely in a climate emergency and need to be moving as quickly as possible on this. So this is, a good step. There's also a ton more that needs to be done. I just want to echo the support for not watering this down at all. So yeah, and I know this stuff is hard, but I think we just need to find ways to get it done. So ask for help when you need it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Is there anyone else here in person who would like to make public comment before we turn to the online folks? No? Okay. I haven't worked this out with Rob at DPW who's helping us out, but I think what I'll ask is for the attendees online to raise their hands, and I'll recognize them, and Rob, if you need to enable mics, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm just gonna, does that work?
That works for me, Chair Barlow, thank you.
Okay. So going from top to bottom, the first person I see is Liz Curry. Go ahead, Liz. Go ahead, Liz.
I was trying to turn on my camera, but that's not working. Thank you. So I'm Liz Curry. I'm a resident of Ward 2. And I just want to mention I'm proud to have worked with and learned from Elizabeth Chant, who spoke earlier. I met Elizabeth when I worked for 20 years in the areas of rehabilitating and retrofitting affordable housing. More recently, I'm a consultant with municipalities and nonprofits to achieve the kinds of goals contained in this ordinance. And I also worked at the EIC and Efficiency Vermont for 5 years. One thing I just want to mention is regarding the Cambridge and New York City ordinances, or programs really, is that those markets have had decades of comprehensive program delivery from a coordinated one-stop shopping entity like Mass Saves and NYSERDA, which are considered energy efficiency utilities. And they both have been paying and prodding building owners for decades to reach these kinds of emissions reduction outcomes through a series of carrots and sticks, including rather substantial incentives. So there's a runway for an ordinance like this. When we talk about other states, and I encourage the City Council to, first I encourage the City Council to do a lot more research about how you implement an ordinance like this, which we absolutely need. There's no question. So I'm not here to say, I don't oppose this ordinance. I'm just saying, to echo some of Elizabeth's compliments that, comments, it's a good start, but it's thin and it needs to be much more robust in terms of the terms and conditions it needs to be successful. And I really encourage city councilors to do a lot of research. So New York City and Cambridge had benchmarking for years, which Elizabeth mentioned is a precursor for the successful implementation of an ordinance like BRO. And we may be able to achieve these outcomes within this timeline if we had comprehensive program design. As Elizabeth mentioned, that includes a package of financing, incentives, education and technical assistance, and enforcement. But that's really how Cambridge and New York and other cities have achieved this, is they've had effective and coordinated one-stop shopping program delivery. For years, they've had an infrastructure, a delivery infrastructure. The cities and states Elizabeth mentioned are examples of energy efficiency utilities that have been able to move the market to this level because there have been deep, deep investments over the past years. So that one-stop shopping principle, that concept is really key. And we don't have this available now in Burlington to either homeowners, tenants, or building owners. And we need it. A big part of this conversation is that the city needs comprehensive energy efficiency policy to affect the kind of changes that will achieve these outcomes. BED put out a zero energy roadmap during the last administration, which is making significant gains in some areas like the grid level and other areas like electrification. But the current approach of introducing these emissions reduction ordinances on a piecemeal and incremental level by building market sector means that the elephant in the room doesn't get addressed, which is how will the city achieve. It can't just be the building owners that achieve this. Building owners will just not, they won't do it. The enforcement, we don't have the capacity in the city to do the enforcement on these buildings. We're seeing that with the multifamily energy efficiency ordinance. Our city needs a serious discussion about coordinated delivery infrastructure between Vermont Gas and BED that embodies the principle of one-stop shopping and brings Efficiency Vermont into the market as well, which I know BED has already done, but it's still uncoordinated, it's fractured, and it creates market confusion for building owners. And Vermont Gas and BED are energy efficiency utilities, but one is under our jurisdiction and the other is not. Burlington residents pay our energy efficiency fee to BED. We don't pay it to Vermont Gas, at least I don't think we do. But regardless, Burlington residents are paying an energy efficiency fee to BED. BED is off doing other things to reduce emissions, but not this ordinance, is not doing what this ordinance does. They may bring Efficiency Vermont into the market to do it, but it's still haphazard, and it doesn't have a comprehensive policy framework. And also, those two entities are not interchangeable when it comes to the types and reasons for delivering technical assistance. One is doing thermal reductions, the other is doing electrification. And they don't develop comprehensive program design together. So I think there's just a lot of concerns about this ordinance. Has so many opportunities to be crafted in a much stronger and more robust way to achieve these outcomes. But I would concur with Elizabeth that the timeline for this is unrealistic at best, and asking building owners, or rather requiring building owners to do this, isn't necessarily going to result in these outcomes. I'll also be submitting some comments in an email just about some technical pieces of the ordinance that are, things aren't defined, and using the carbon fee as to help low-income folks. So when you deliver energy efficiency services to low-income residents, that can either be, if you're just delivering to residents themselves, then essentially you just need to pay their utility bills, because there's very little you can do to help the resident themselves lower their energy bills if the building owner isn't on the hook. So again, like kind of if you're gonna help the low-income residents, which predominantly in Burlington are tenants, because 70% of our housing stock are renters, then we're really talking about how do you affect change in the multifamily rental market, which has its own best practices in program design. There are consultants in Vermont, like Energy Futures Group and Optimum, there are consultants in Vermont outside of the EEU world that would love to help Burlington design these ordinances so they are effective, so that they reflect best practices, so that they are achievable, and so that all these goals can be met with people who are experts in this field. I would just urge you to consider the idea of setting aside a small amount of money to ask one of those consultants to go through this ordinance and really craft the design that will work and help you understand how to make this work. Because what this does right now is create a bare bones skeletal outcomes and goals, but it doesn't actually achieve what you think it's going to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Next up online, we have Quentin Zondervan. Go ahead, Quentin.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Wonderful. My name is Quentin Zondervan. I'm a former Cambridge, Massachusetts City Councilor. And as a former councilor, I know how difficult your job is, so thank you for doing it. And thank you for considering this critically important legislation. So first, the good news is that you can have meaningful performance standards for your existing buildings. I know this because we did it in Cambridge, and I was the lead sponsor on that legislation. You're going about it exactly the right way through dialogue and negotiation with all the stakeholders to make sure that what you end up with is both doable and impactful. The other good news is that renewable energy is only getting cheaper and more abundant, while fossil fuels are only getting more expensive and scarce because we cannot afford to keep pumping the atmosphere full of pollution. As I stated before to you all, I'm here to offer my assistance as you develop this policy. So please reach out with any questions or requests, and we'll do our best to support you in this critically important work. Because as we know, the bad news is that the clock is ticking and the climate disaster is only getting worse the longer we delay meaningful action. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. Next up is Kelly Devine.
Thank you very much, Councilor Barnlow. My name is Kelly Devine, and I'm speaking on behalf of the 250 members of the Burlington Business Association. I just found out about this. I think it was just released a few hours ago, so it's really hard for me to comment with much substance on the content of it, but I can say that based on what I heard tonight, especially, thanks to Elizabeth and Liz Curry for the comments they made, because I think that they're really important. Before I moved to Vermont, I had worked for 15 years in the energy efficiency industry in Massachusetts, in the commercial end of it towards the tail end, and I'm very well aware of all of those incentives and supports that they talked about. They really did make a huge difference in the ability of the organization I worked for to deliver both analysis in terms of improving the energy efficiency of buildings and then eventually implementation. I don't see or haven't heard from any building owners in this audience, so I just wonder how aware they are of it, and I don't think that without bringing those voices to the table, we'll be able to really achieve a difference. I wonder, of the 279 buildings mentioned, and I feel like we've had this conversation before, how many of those are directly tied to one of the major institutions in Burlington, either the hospital, the university, or Champlain College? And if that's the case, have they been brought in at all on this to weigh in? What measures do they already have underway for those buildings? I know that up there, they've done a lot in this area because I know that there's definitely an interest in improving their impact on the climate. So those are some major concerns that I have. I think that this, is very initial, and if it's not done right, it's really not going to produce any results. We have, I'll also mention, we have many large buildings in Burlington's downtown right now, commercial buildings that are mostly vacant. I guess the good news is that they're not using much energy in them, but also the bad news is that building owners right now are not are seeing the income productivity of buildings go down because they're the spaces are vacant. They're not bringing any rent, and I do know that there are several other large commercial professional services firms that are very seriously considering leaving downtown within the next year or two. So I think we need to think about the use of those spaces as well when we think about these existing buildings and, what kind of incentives and what the future outlook is for those building owners if we want them to go forward and make improvements. We saw recently one building, the redevelopment of the Y, that was put on hold in part because of some of the conditions of the permit made the project economically not viable for the short term because right now construction costs are very high. So I think this needs more work, and I would like to see more outreach to those that are directly impacted so we can come up with something that's really going to, at the end of the day, have some real impact from Burlington. That being said, I think that we do have to seriously consider our climate, and I do think that members of the business community believe that that's important. They just need to, be at the table to help find the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Our last online participant who's with their hand raised is Ethan Robbins. Ethan, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ethan Robbins. I'm a student at the University of Vermont, and I'm also a policy intern for Run on Climate. I just want to come on here and say that I do support the ordinance and that I think that this is the best way and option going forward for us to move buildings off of fossil fuels and for us to actually be able to achieve that net zero status by 2030. A commitment was made a long time ago by this government to be able to reach that status, and its constituents is depending on it to be able to reach it. I think the city councilors should really take into perspective public interest and how many constituents that they have that are very tied to climate change and how they want to implement this policy in general. And honestly, I just think that we need to protect our city of Burlington and have this continue to be a model for other cities in climate policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there anybody else online who wants to speak? Please indicate so by raising your hand or using the raise hand function in Zoom. I'm not seeing anybody. So, is there anybody else in the room? Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Hi, Eric Morrow, Burlington resident and architect.
You state your name again and pull the mic a little closer.
Yeah, sorry, my name is Eric Morrow, Burlington resident and local architect. I'm also a member of the Burlington 2030 district effort on the executive committee and been involved in energy efficiency for a long time. Just new to this ordinance and looking at it, so I apologize if I ask a basic question, but is it really between 10,000 and 50,000 square feet, the full scope of the 279 buildings?
Could you pull the mic a little closer? And this is more of an opportunity for public comment and not a back and forth with.
Do I have the correct understanding that the scope is between 10,000 and 50,000? Yes. Okay, thank you. My comment is just that building owners of that size often don't have the facility staff to support these changes as much as building owners with larger footprints. So building owners of 50,000 to 300,000 square feet have a lot more staff. just due to their size and scale. Those larger building footprints also have a larger impact in the energy use. So my back of the napkin understanding is maybe we're looking at 16% of the building square footage of the city with this ordinance, just doing quick math. But if we increase the footprint size, say something larger than a maximum of 50,000, and maybe the floor of 10,000 is too low, we'll get the effort into the hands of facility staff that are more technical and maybe not rely as much on city staff and other support mechanisms. So just some consideration that the larger buildings have a bit more capacity and expertise to handle changes like this. I applaud all the effort and everybody's time spent here, and certainly all the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I see we have two more online, actually one. I see you, Jack Hansen, online. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead, Jack.
Hear me okay?
I can hear you, but you're very faint.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm calling from a train, so it's a little spotty. But yeah, my name's Jack Hansen. I served previously on the City Council and on the TOOC committee, worked extensively with Councillor Bergman and Councillor Barlow on building decarbonization policy. I'm here to offer my significantly on this policy. I think this is an important step forward. As others have said, this is really just the beginning, and if we're serious about decarbonizing all buildings by 2030 or even anywhere in that time frame, it's going to take a lot more than this, but I think this is a strong expansion. I think it complements and builds upon both the rental weatherization ordinance and the, as some call it, the carbon impact fee, pollution impact fee ordinance that regulates buildings over 50,000 square feet. So I think it builds upon what we've already done here in Burlington and is important staff. I encourage you to move forward, keep the policy strong and not shrink it, but rather look actually towards expanding it and strengthening it further. I'm happy to continue working with any and all of you, both members of the public and councilors and staff and anyone interested to try to develop as strong and as effective as a policy as possible. So appreciate all the other folks who also weighed in and appreciate the committee and city staff for hearing our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I don't see anybody else in the room or online who wants to offer public comment. Oh, we have one more. Come on up.
Hi there, my name is Annie Jackson. I am not a resident of Burlington, but longtime resident of Charlotte and a student at UVM. I just want to echo a lot of what was said here, that I am in support of this ordinance. I think it's a really great step forward. I think it is true that it is time to see businesses and people with power to start taking some of the responsibility and putting this into enforcing regulations so that we can actually meet our 2030 goals. And I just wanted to say, as a student at UVM, and I'm guessing a lot of the buildings at UVM would fall within this ordinance, that I know there's a lot of energy on campus that could be tapped into. There's a lot of eager grad and undergrad students who could help to be a part of this. Students who maybe don't have a lot of time but have a lot of passion and energy around this are appalled by the amount of heat that is being used in the buildings that we have classes in. And I would just encourage you to really see that as a partnership that could also help to move this forward. You know, reaching out to professors, reaching out to students, having a forum on campus. So you may have already considered that, but just to echo my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, going once, going twice. I don't see anybody online, I don't see anybody in the room. I'll go ahead and close public comment, but I guess even though it's not on our agenda, I'll ask if any counselors want to make closing remarks, and I'll note that Councilor Bergman has joined us over Zoom as well. So any counselors want to say anything in closing? Yeah, go ahead. I'll go Councilor Broderick first, and then Councilor Whitwood.
Great. Yeah, I guess just to close, thank you to everyone who came to speak today, online and in person. To those who are watching but were unable to formulate something to say, or are watching this in the future, hopefully the near future, please send any feedback, questions, etc. to the TUC. It's so important that we as a community are coming together for policies like this that work for the entire city and advance our goals in tackling a sorely needed issue. And I, for one, am very excited to get the ball rolling on this. So I've spoken enough today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Councilor Whitman?
Thanks. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but thank you. There's a lot more process that needs to go into this, and at my first read, I left with a lot more questions than I had answers to, and I really appreciate the comments of particularly a few folks here tonight who have expertise in this sector. So thank you for making time for attending. For me, if we're going to move forward in this extensive process, not having the business community at the table, not having building owners at the table, not having a spreadsheet of who those stakeholders are is a non-starter. I don't see this going very far without having a more comprehensive conversation with the actual stakeholders who will have to implement this. Particularly, the workforce development issue here is pretty substantial. I mean, we gave more runway to the composting law in Vermont than we did, than we have done here. So I just think, I think all of us who sit in this room, who sit on this side of the table or that side of the table, care deeply about our changing climate and want to make sure that our community is moving forward on this. We're not Washington, D.C. We're not New York. We do not have the infrastructure to enforce compliance at a large scale and to support, such as mass saves was brought up earlier. So there is just so much more research and so much more work that needs to go into this, in my opinion. But I appreciate hearing everybody's comments and that folks share a sense of care and urgency. So I'll just leave that there.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. And I'll just say thank you to everybody who spoke tonight. I really appreciate the engagement that people have on this topic and look forward to working with other members of the TUC to do more research and hear from others as well. Like I said at the outset, I know that a lot of the material is fairly new. It's only posted yesterday. So as other people listening to this meeting have an opportunity to weigh in or to read the material that was posted and want to weigh in, please do so. You can send written comments to committee members or to me directly, and I will distribute them. And there will also be other opportunities to weigh in on this ordinance proposal at the next TUC meeting, where I think we'll take this up. If not at that meeting, it'll be another meeting in the near future. And we look forward to hearing what people have to say about this. So thank you so much, and thank you for coming out tonight. So without further business and without objection, I will adjourn us at 7:08. Thank you.